An economic crisis in Sri Lanka, which is becoming increasingly dramatic, with residents' life savings virtually disappearing into thin air. One estimate from Johns Hopkins University shows real inflation at over 130% in March. That's approximately 6 times the official rate by the government. Nearly everything is in short supply, especially imported goods. The government is even asking airlines to stop refuelling in the country to save on fuel. One of the reasons for the crisis is the corona-induced slump in tourism. On top of that, there were political missteps, such as the ban on artificial fertilisers. The result? An agricultural crisis, an industry that employs a particularly large number of people in Sri Lanka.
Mary Albions has spent more than half of her life plucking leaves on this tea estate. After her husband died, she became the sole breadwinner for her family. But she's barely making ends meet.
The income we get is not enough to cover our expenses. This is the only work we do. We have no other work.
Mary is one of thousands who work on privately owned plantations spread across the hilly countryside of central Sri Lanka. Tea is one of the area's most exported commodities, making the industry vital for the Sri Lankan economy, accounting for $1.3 billion annually. With the country deep in financial crunch, the tea industry too has hit a rough patch. The severe shortage of fuel and long power cuts have affected the industry's daily operations, including processing, production and transportation. Dilumpati Rane, the regional general manager of this estate, fears that the effects will soon be felt by the workers.
Once the crop productivity gets affected, the workers are going to get affected because they will not get the required number of working days. Now at present we are offering them 6 days of work, at times 7 days of work. We will be compelled to cut down their work to about 4 days a week or so. So generally their income will be low.
The problems for the tea industry and for agriculture as a whole started before the current economic blow. Last year, in a highly controversial move, the Sri Lankan government banned the use and import of chemical fertilizers overnight in a bid to become the first country in the world to fully adopt organic farming. While the ban was later reversed after protests, the crop yield was already affected. This faulty policy decision by the government led to a significant drop in production and export of tea. The current crisis further does not bode well for the figures. Mary is concerned about what might happen if the situation worsens.
If we lose our jobs because of the issues in the country and we're unable to find any other employment, we will have to stay home. If so, we won't have anything to eat, and we won't be able to look into any of our needs.
Her livelihood and that of thousands depends on the tea estates, many of which are looking at tough times.
Mick Moore joins us from the International Centre for Tax and Development. Mick, do you reckon the IMF is going to step in this case, and will it step in time before the economy disintegrates?
It seems almost certain that it will step in. We are actually very close to an agreement between the government of Sri Lanka and the IMF, but the timescale is really important. We're still talking of weeks, 2 or 3 months maybe, and in the meantime, the government is in an acute crisis, as you said. The export revenue at the moment probably covers about half of the minimum import needs for basics like fuel and food and medicines. So there is an acute gap here that has to be filled somehow in the next few weeks.
What are your suggestions? How is Sri Lanka going to fill that gap? We're talking about an enormous task, aren't we?
We are. I mean, most official organizations take the very understandable view that they cannot release any new money to Sri Lanka until there is an agreement in place with the IMF, and I understand that. So the government is currently living mainly on credits from the government of India. And we don't know how long the government of India is going to be willing to do that, or whether other governments in the region, including China, are going to step in with short-term assistance. So it's very much up in the air at the moment.
And it seems to put Sri Lanka, from what you're saying, in a precarious situation as far as global alliances go and regional tensions too.
Yes, I mean, Sri Lanka has been at the center of quite a lot of tugging between China, India, and the United States in particular. And an agreement with the IMF is actually going to depend on all those three countries and various others agreeing on the rescheduling of the money that Sri Lanka owes to them. So, this is a very precarious situation, but I hope that none of those three parties is going to be so irresponsible as to block an agreement with the IMF, because if there is no agreement with the IMF, then we have disaster.
So much at stake and so little time. Mick Moore from the International Centre for Tax and Development on the economic crisis in Sri Lanka. Thank you very much for your input.
Thank you. Thank you.